universities. And for us, we rely on the strength in a group. We don't hire lecturers. It's members from the group who tell us, I would like to share something. And when they tell us that, we allow them to share. So that's how Frederick is coming in today. Today, we are going to talk about the conceptual framework. It is one of the topics that has emerged as an area of concern for many students. They struggle to understand what is it, why is it important, why is it important in the research journey. They also struggle to understand how to connect their variables in the conceptual framework. So today, Frederick Karethi is going to unpack that for us, is going to help us understand how to develop a good conceptual framework, also give us insights on what a not so good conceptual framework looks like. Frederick has a background in marketing and strategic management. He's a PhD candidate at the moment. So as you can see, it's not just professors who can teach. Here we rely on peer-to-peer learning. He's a faculty at associate faculty at KCA University, and he's also a peer reviewer in a couple of journals, and he's a consultant and also works as a part-time lecturer. So over to you, Frederick. The floor is yours. We are here for 1 hour and a half. It could be shorter or longer. No, it can be longer because it's late in the night, but we are here for 1 hour and a half. If you have any questions, I think Frederick will make it interactive so you can ask, but let's mute so that then we can hear what Frederick has for us. Over to you.
Thank you very much. As you have heard, my name is Frederick, and I'm here today to not only share, but also to learn, so that in the process or in this journey that we undertook of making ourselves better in terms of academics, we can learn a lot together. So today, we are going to look at how to build a strong conceptual framework where we want to move from confusion and we are heading to clarity in the research design. Of course, as being masters and PhD students, we are in the process of research, building a strong thesis, getting strong papers, and publishing them in strong journals, high impact journals. And one of the key things that will make that happen is when you have a very strong conceptual framework. And the quote of the day will be that every great study begins with a clear conceptual vision. And it's good that let's learn how to build one. So we're trying to look at how do we build a strong and clear conceptual framework. And for you to build a strong conceptual framework, we need to ask ourselves, why is this important? Why is it important that we have this webinar today? Why is it that we are here to talk about this today? Because it's not because we are idle or because we don't have any other thing to do. There are various things that are very important that we need to think of and build as researchers. And one of the things that it's a fact that is out there is that most of us struggle to turn our ideas into a coherent conceptual framework. Can you, because we have so many ideas, we are thinking about different issues, we are trying to study this, we are trying to study this, but how do we turn this into something that you can publish, something that can be of high impact? We struggle with that a lot. It's also good to know that if you have a conceptual framework, it gives structure and logic to your study. You see, for your study to really flow, to have logic, you need to have a very good conceptual framework where someone will be able to tell what are the independent variables, what is the dependent variables, do we have intervening variables, do we have moderating variables. We need to have a clear and logical conceptual framework. Also because that without a good conceptual framework, you risk having a very descriptive research, which is not analytical. As a researcher, you are not only describing, you have to analyze, you have to see the logic, we have to see the flow. So without a good conceptual framework, we risk finding ourselves without any analytics, without not knowing what to expect. It's also good to know that we are here, or this session is very important because a conceptual framework clarifies how variables are related and it will guide our research design. We need to know how our variables are related. What is the independent variables? How does it affect the dependent variables? Do we have an intervening variable? And how does it impact the dependent variables? What is the impact of the moderating variables? So it's very important to know that the concept framework is able to clarify those things. Also, it's good to ensure that we going to be able to know that a conceptual framework ensures alignment between the objectives you have in your study, the theories you have, the methodology, and also the empirical studies. So it's the conceptual framework that will be able to align those things. That because we develop it using the synthesis of the empirical studies and the research, the empirical studies. So you find that it's very good to see the alignment for us to build a good conceptual framework. And also because a conceptual framework strengthens our ability to link the theory with real world problems for greater impact. The reason we do research is to solve a gap in the society. It is to have impact. So how do we link that theory into the theories that we study in school, in class, in the books that we study, into making sure that we have ability to link that into the real world issues, and that we do through the conceptual framework. Our learning objectives, or why or what we should at least be able to understand by the time we live here today, is at least we should be able to define and understand the role of a conceptual framework. Why do we have a conceptual framework? What is a conceptual framework in the first place? So it's good that that is one of the objectives that we are going to have. The second objective that we are going to have is to be able to distinguish between what is a theoretical framework and what is a conceptual framework. Because as scholars, sometimes we are not able to tell the difference between the two. And at least as we discuss, as we go forward, we should be able to distinguish those two. Also, we should be able to identify the traits of a weak and a strong conceptual framework. There's a conceptual framework that you can see that is clear, that shows the logic, that shows the relationship, that is something that you can be able to tell from point A to point Z. There's also a conceptual framework that will struggle even to understand, that doesn't have a flow, that mixes up, maybe has so many variables, maybe has the arrows are pointing in the wrong direction. So we can be able to see what is a bad conceptual framework, what is a weak conceptual framework, and what is a strong conceptual framework. We're also going to try to develop and evaluate a conceptual framework. At least we should be able to see how do you develop a conceptual framework and how do you make sure that your conceptual framework is really good for you to be able to present your research. Of course, because we are researchers, we are in a journey, an academic journey. a research journey. And when we talk about the research journey, we ask ourselves, which is the process, or how do we research? The first thing we do is that every person who is coming into academics have maybe at one point identified a problem, a gap, something that you feel that needs to be understood better. So you have found a research problem. And once you do that, you're able to do the next thing you do is to undertake literature review. You want to really understand the issue in detail. You want to study the theories that guide the study. You want to study the empirical studies that have been there. You really want to get into details to see, is the gap I'm seeing there, or is it my not understanding? So you keep on studying, you study more books, you study more journals, you're trying to review the literature. And then once you're able to do that, you can develop a conceptual framework, because from the literature, you're going to see the theories, you can identify the variables, you can identify what is a dependent variable, what is a dependent variable, are we going to have a direct relationship, do we have a mediating variable? So from that point, as you review your literature, you're able to develop your conceptual framework. Of course, after you develop the conceptual framework, you are going to develop the research methodology, or how are you going about in case for you to go out there. Are you going to do a census? Is it going to be a descriptive study? Is it going to be a qualitative study, a quantitative study? What answers are you trying to answer? Is it the what? Is it the why? What research philosophy will you adopt? You decide then there and you put it out there. And of course, as you do your research, you will get your findings. So the findings will either be what you expected or what you did not expect, because as a research, you're going out there to do a study. So of course, if you're doing a quantitative study, you'll have a hypothesis, you'll be able to test the hypothesis. If you're doing a qualitative study, you're going to get the patterns, the thematic patterns, and such things. And of course, after that, you are going to develop your conclusion. And then the conclusion will be, what is it that you think you have found? What are the gaps that you did cover? What are the areas you think that in future we should be able to study and we should be able to really try to understand? So one of the things that you should have in your mind, or as you do your research, is that the conceptual framework is a bridge that connects the research problem and the methodology. The type of the relationship you identify is able to tell us, what methodology am I going to use? What type of study am I going to adopt? Do I depend on primary data? Do I depend on secondary data? It connects those things. Of course, the research problem is what needs to be studied. What is it that is there that you need to study, to find and find and solve the issues that exist? Of course, the literature review will provide you with a theoretical grounding and also help you to identify clearly where the gap is. Because the worst you can do is when you are talking about, you're presenting your findings and you cannot explain what the gap is. So you really need to tell us what gap exists. What is the unit of analysis? What is the unit of observation? You really need to be able to understand those things. So the concept of framework it's going to organize the key variables and how they relate with each other. So that is the time you're going to clear that even though someone is not a scholar, has never stepped in a research class, can be able to just look and tell us, these are the independent variables, this is the mediating variable, and this is the dependent variable. Of course, the methodology is what is going to translate this relationship into data collection and analysis, because now from that you will be able to go out there and collect data. You're going to see the type of data you need, how you're going to collect it, and how you're going to analyze it. Of course, the findings is what you get, and it's going to test and illustrate the framework into practice. That whatever we are saying, this is what we have found, and this is the practice, of course, from which you are going to make the conclusions. And now that we try to understand that we have talked about the research journey and explained why we need that we have a conceptual framework there, the question we ask ourselves is, what is this conceptual framework? What is this? Is it a cow, or what is the conceptual framework? That is a question that somehow you ask yourself. Of course, a conceptual framework visually or logically presents the key variables and the relationship among them within your study. You see, variables can rate differently in different studies. So there is no constant way of how variables relate. It is a conceptual framework that is going to tell us how are these variables going to relate, are expected to relate in this study. So that you cannot go and copy someone's conceptual framework and adopt it as your own. You have to have your own conceptual framework that tells us how are your variables going to relate. What is it that you're expecting from the relationship with that variable? So it is this conceptual framework that will serve as a map that guides your entire research process, because it tells us how the variables are relating, and so you can be able to tell, how am I going to go through the research process? How am I going to formulate my program? How am I going to interpret data? Because you are not just interpreting data based on anything. There's a conceptual framework. There's a logic. There's a roadmap that you are going to follow. Also, the conceptual framework shows how and why you expect the variables to interact. And it is based on the theories that exist, the logic that exists, and prior evidence. So you find that in the conceptual framework, you are going to tell us how do these variables interact. And it is not based on just what you want. It is not based on your own intuition. It is based on various factors. The factor is, do we have theories that we can use to talk about and guide this study? Is it even logical? Because you also need to understand that there is a logic in research. Do you have prior evidence? Do you have studies do you have empirical evidence that shows that whatever you're showing can really be what we are using? Also, that the conceptual framework bridges the gap between theoretical understanding and the empirical investigations. You find that you will go through the theories, because you cannot have a conceptual framework that does not also have a theoretical background backing. But more so, you also now have to link it with the empirical evidence that exists. You find that whereas a theoretical framework deals more with the theories without the empirical evidence, a conceptual framework links both the theoretical understanding and the conceptual framework. Also, a conceptual framework will help you, or help anyone who's going to read your work, to quickly understand the structure and logic behind your study. So if you want people to quickly grasp what is it that you're talking about, what is the logic behind your study, the conceptual framework is a key and gives answers to those things. So what's the difference? That I've mentioned that there's a theoretical framework. How is it different from a conceptual framework? So a theoretical framework draws from established theories and models. That most of what it talks about is how does the theories impact the variables, or how does the theories guide the variables. It explains why variables are related based on existing scholarly foundations. So the foundations, because as scholars, our foundation is the theories that exist. Before you argue about something, you find that there's a theory that exists about what you're saying. So as a scholar, most of the time, you're either building a theory, building on a theory, or there's a theory that guides whatever we argue. So you find that a theoretical framework explains why the variables are rated based on the theories. That why is it that, for example, innovation impacts performance? Do you have a theory? Why is it that let's say modernization affects performance? Do you have a theory that guides that? So it provides the theoretical lenses through which your study will be interpreted. So as you interpret your theories, as you interpret your study, there are theories that you keep saying that is aligned to this theory. The findings are aligned to this theory. So it gives you the lenses that what theories do you expect? Even as you deal with people, what you expect sometimes is based on theories. That as someone keeps studying more and more and more, the behavior will change depending on what. As a scholar, you tell there's a theory that guides why do people behave the way they behave. A conceptual framework, on the other hand, is derived from the synthesis of the theories, the empirical findings, and the logical reasoning. So for this one, you're not just going to use the theories. Although we have theories that are going to explain to us or how the variables relate, do you have empirical findings? What have other scholars found? You find that you're going to look at data maybe 5 years old, the recent data that we have found. It's very important to look at the empirical findings so that you are able to understand a conceptual framework. It is also driven from the logical reasoning. What is the logic behind what we are saying? Because sometimes you cannot just develop something that doesn't have a logic. A conceptual framework must have a logic. It explains how you as a researcher perceives the relationship among variables. It is tailored to the specific study context and the research problem. So you find that the conceptual framework is basically for your study. Whereas the theoretical might sometimes framework might apply in more than one study. A conceptual framework must be tailored for your specific study. So although both provide structure and direction, a conceptual framework tries to operationalize the theory, showing its practical application to your study. So a conceptual framework is more about your study. But for us to understand more about the conceptual framework, it would be important for us to look a bit about the theoretical framework. So we have said that a theoretical framework is a foundation of research study. It is built from established theories and models and tries to explain how and why a certain phenomenon occurs. But whatever is happening, why does it occur? There is a theory that tells why do you behave the way you behave? How do certain variables relate in a certain way? There are theories that try to explain that. It is the lens, the anchor that guides your research. That as a researcher, you will need a theoretical framework to tell us what is it, or how is it, or why is it we are expecting this to occur? Why is it that we are expecting that as you innovate, as you modernize, as you restructure, why is it that we are expecting as you reposition your company, why is it that we're expecting the performance to be positive? There are theories that try to guide that. So you find that we are talking about the lenses, the anchor that guide your research. It shows which theories or a combination of theories informs your understanding on the topic and how it connects to the variables. That as you talk about performance of institutions, as you talk about leadership, as you talk about what to expect, there are theories that really try to explain to us. It is not you just thinking. There are certain theories that you use The purpose, of course, of a theoretical framework is to provide the foundation for understanding why the research problem exists. That a theory will try to tell us why is it that this thing exists. It provides that foundation. That whatever you do, that after we do this, for example, after every stage, there's what to expect. Even before you go there, there's a theory that tells you what will you expect as these things change. Once your company starts performing, there's a theory that tells you what are the next challenges. What is it that you're going to expect? So it explains to us why a problem exists. It is what will anchor your study to established theories and to ensure scholarly credibility. You cannot, your study will not be credible. Your paper will not be credible if it doesn't have any theories that have been used to guide that study. You cannot be just throwing in things without having a theoretical backing of what you're saying. You need to tell us what is it. So the theoretical framework is able to show us that. It guides the foundation of research questions and hypotheses. That how do you build on the questions? How do you build on the hypothesis? It is through the theories. The theories will be able to tell us how does a certain relationship exist. So as you set up the null hypothesis, the alternative hypothesis, as you come up with the questions, you find that the theoretical framework and the theories will be very important. It will be able to help you identify the key variables that express and explain their expected relationship. You find that the theories can tell you the variables of a study. From a general perspective, that as you go through a theoretical framework, you can be able to tell us what variables that you're going to use. Do we need an intervening variable? Do we need a moderating variable? Or do we just need the independent and the dependent variables? The theories can be able to tell us that. It offers the lenses of how you're going to interpret your results, and it will connect your results to existing knowledge. So you find that you cannot interpret your theories without any backing, your findings, your results without any backing. So you need a theoretical backing to enable you explain your findings. So it offers that interpretation because that is what we are expecting. Because as you study sometimes, a theory will tell you what is it that you're going to expect? What is it that you're going to find? It prevents your study from being purely descriptive, a theoretical, that it's just describing things. There is nothing that tells us why we're expecting what we're expecting, why we are getting these results that we are getting. So I've tried to develop a simple theoretical framework. And you find that as I have these three variables, leadership, motivation, and performance, it is based on what? There are theories that try to explain to us. There's a two-factor theory and there's transformational leadership theory. That you find that these theories explain to us that the leadership style will dictate the performance. The motivation of employees will dictate performance. The leadership style will dictate motivation. So you find that there's the theoretical backing that as you as a leader try to adopt a certain leadership model, that this is my style of leadership, you know that it will have impact on employees' motivation and will have impact on employees' performance. So there are theories that makes you understand that even before you start, there's what you expect. That as I adopt this leadership model, what is it that I'm going to expect? Or what is it that I believe by the time I adopt a certain model? You find that, for example, when you talk about theory X and theory Y, you find that theory X, we believe employees are lazy, they have to be forced. So you're adopting that because there is a backing. I think these people are lazy, so you adopt that theory. if you are coming from a theoretical understanding that employees need to be motivated and to work, so you adopt a certain leadership because you are a theory leader. So now that we have tried to discuss what is a theoretical framework, we need to ask ourselves as we go back to the main topic is why is it that you need a conceptual framework? Why is it that why is it not just develop your research without a conceptual framework? You know, it's a question that you ask yourself. Number one, it is because it will enable you clarify what your study is about. So for you to easily tell people what your study is about, you just need a conceptual framework, a clear one. That as I look at your conceptual framework, I can be able to tell what is this that we are trying to understand. So it guides the selection of the variables and indicators. You find that you'll have the variables and the specific indicators that as we talk about performance of a company, what are the indicators? You will be able, from a conceptual framework, you'll be able to tell, for example, we're talking about profitability, reduction of the cost of sales, expansion. So you can be able to see those things. As we talk about repositioning, what is it that we're talking about? What are the indicators? You'll be able to, let's say, image repositioning, physical repositioning. As we talk about innovation, so it can be able to enable you select those variables and indicators. It will enable you also for anyone to see what are the indicators that you're using. It will also direct how you're going to collect data and how you're going to analyze data. Because the relationship that we have tells us how we are going to collect data. It tells to try to explain to us that this is a relationship we have. So as we analyze data, what is it that we need? Do we need to have in mind the changes in the intervening variable? Or what is it that we need to think as we analyze our data? It will ensure that there is alignment between your objectives, your theories, and the results. There is nothing as bad as when you do a research and you're presenting your thesis for your final defense, and the objectives and theories and research are not aligned. And you have been doing this study for the last 5 years, maybe 6, maybe 10, maybe 3, and then you're not able to align them. So it's very important to have a clear conceptual framework because it will enable you understand what are the objectives and what are the results I expect and what are the theories that have guided this conceptual framework. It also provides a clear direction of your research because a research takes a certain direction. It shows how variables are related. So it shows a direction. It tells us where we are heading. It helps us to interpret and explain the findings. If we say that there is a direct relationship between innovation and performance, then you see that it will provide us or help us explain that. Because already once you look at the framework, you know what to expect. So as you try to explain your findings, there's a fallback plan of what is it that I was expecting. Of course, it will make your study more credible. There is nothing as bad as when you do a study that doesn't seem as if it's credible, as if we're using guesswork. So, what are the key ingredients that are in a conceptual framework? Of course, we start with the variables. There will be an independent variable. You cannot have a conceptual framework that does not have an independent variable. You cannot have a conceptual framework that does not have a dependent variable. Those are the major two, that every conceptual framework will have an independent and a dependent variable. Also, that your conceptual framework might have a moderating variable. Do we have this variable that is moderating the relationship between the dependent and the independent variables, and there's nothing much we can do about it? We cannot try to influence it. It will have an intervening or mediating variable. It might have that. So it's an ingredient that do we have an intervening variable? This variable that if we do something, it will impact, that we can work on it and then it will impact the dependent variable. So it shows the relationship between these variables. What is it? What is the relationship that exists between these variables? Is it interactive? Is it correlational? Is it causal? What is it that? What is the relationship that exists? So it's going to explain to us the relationship that you're going to expect. The other ingredient is that the conceptual framework will give a clear and logical representation of your research. That we are trying to align to your research with objectives. That are your objectives aligned? Can it try to easily interpret what your research is all about? The other thing that will have to be an ingredient or something that you have to know before you develop your conceptual framework is that it has to have a theoretical anchoring. You cannot develop a conceptual framework without thinking about the theories that provide the foundation of that study. So you find that the relationship or each relationship that exists in that conceptual framework should be supported by a relevant theory or by relevant theory or theories or the literature that exists. So either there's empirical findings or there is a theoretical backing on that relationship that you're talking about. There is the contextual relevance that because your conceptual framework is unique to your study, it should be able to reflect that uniqueness, the dynamics that make your study what it is, that makes it different from any other study about any other person. So what is the contextual relevance? How is it relevant to what you're saying? So you find that you really need that to think about that, or it's part of the conceptual framework. Or how do we get a conceptual framework? Or what is it that we use as we develop? What is the backing of a conceptual framework? The first one is the existing theories. You find that as you develop a conceptual framework, you'll have to draw insights from theoretical models that explain similar phenomena. I've repeated this again and again, that you cannot have a conceptual framework that is not backed by any existing theory that has explained what to expect, that has explained similar issues. It has to be guided, or you will have to develop it from the existing empirical literature. What is it that others have seen? What are the previous studies saying? What are the findings? So you find that as you develop your conceptual framework, you'll have to check out the previous studies. They can enable you to develop a conceptual framework. It also has to be guided by the logical reasoning because it is unique to you. It is unique to your context. Then it has to have logical reasoning. You can either use deductive or inductive logic. That as you build these new linkages, you have to base them on evidence and also on intuition, that it has to be unique to you. It's not something that anyone else can just sit and develop. It has to be unique to you because of your logic, guided by the empirical findings and the existing literature. And this logic sometimes will come from your professional, your field experiences. What are these practical things that you have seen? Because as you study, as you do your PhD, maybe you have worked for 20, 30 years, maybe you have worked for 5 years, 10 years, or maybe you have studied all through and you have done your master's, your bachelor's. So there's that experience you have that tries to build on the logic, that gives you the logic of why is it that we are doing what we are doing. So what are these steps that we need to have as you build your conceptual framework? Because it is not an event. To build a conceptual framework is not a once-off thing. It takes time. It takes various steps. And I've tried to use a topic on turnaround strategy and performance of commercial state corporations in our country here, Kenya. So, what are the steps that you're going to use to be able to build your conceptual framework? The first one is to identify the key concepts. So you begin by reviewing your research objectives, the literature, and abstracts to extract the central ideas. So you're trying to get the concept, you're trying to get the central idea that as I develop this conceptual framework, what are my research objectives? What does the literature say? You have to focus on the variables that directly relate to the organizational recovery. For example, in our topic here, that you're going to focus on the variables that relate to organizational recovery and performance. Because in our topic here, we are talking about turnaround and performance. So turnaround is recovery. You have been performing poorly, and you want to recover, to turn around. So you'll have to go to the variables that directly relate to organizational recovery and those that show that result to performance. You have to define each concept clearly based on the theories and the empirical studies. But as you look at these concepts, as you look at these ideas, as you focus on these variables, what are the theories and what are the empirical findings? You cannot develop a variable that the findings are saying exact opposite of what you want. If you are talking about turnaround strategy, you cannot come up with variables of organizations that have already performed. So you have first to turn around. You're trying to turn around and head towards where you're going to. You have to group these ideas into either are they the independent variables? Is this the dependent variable? Do these contribute to a mediating variable? Does it result to a moderating variable? So you find that you have to group them, and you're grouping them based on the theories and the empirical findings that you have gone through. So you find that when we talk about independent variables in turnaround strategy, we are looking at things like innovation, management restructuring, modernization, repositioning. That do we have that as we talk about independent variables, if your company is failing, do you have evidence? Do you have empirical studies that tell us that innovation works to turn around that? Do you have any backing that tells us that restructuring, management restructuring, can enable you recover? Do you have any theories that tells us modernization will enable you perform? Do you have any empirical findings that tells us strategic reposition repositioning will enable you perform. Then you'll have the dependent variable, which is the organization performance. That as you turn around, do you have evidence that tells us that the organizations are going to perform? We have theories that tells us that as you turn around, you're expected to perform. We have empirical findings. So you're trying to use that and trying to look at the uniqueness of those variables, that as I combine these variables, can I identify a gap that is not filled? Of course, you are going to look at what are the mediating variables. The mediating variables will be dependent on your explanation. You find that a mediating variable is something that at least you can try to do something about it, so that as you try to impact it, it will impact. As the independent variables try to impact it, or as you as an organization try to impact it, it can affect it. At least it's something that is a bit nearer what you're doing. Of course, the moderating variables is something that from a theoretical or from the empirical studies, there's nothing much that you can do as an organization. You are going to define your variables and the indicators. So each concept will have measurable indicators. And these indicators are what makes it possible to collect and analyze data. That as you talk about a concept, you will have to have measurable indicators. What is it that can tell us that there's performance? What is it that can enable you to think that a certain company is undertaking innovation? And in our example here, we are saying that when we talk about our key variables in turnaround strategy, we are looking at innovation, management restructuring, modernization, and strategic repositioning. What are the indicators of innovation? You'll find that you'll talk about new processes, that as you talk about innovation, you think about product improvements, ICT adoption. So there are indicators that will enable you see that or measure. What is it that you can use to measure that there's innovation in that company? Do you have new processes? Do you have new products? What are the indicators of management restructuring, for example? Is as we try to recover from our situation, what is it that we are going to do? Are we trying to redesign the role of managers? Are we trying, for example, in government institutions to move from a vertical to a more flatter, hierarchical type of leadership or management? Have we had a change in leadership? That as we talk about modernization, you find that you have to think of issues like automation, digital system, trying to simplify processes. So what are the indicators? So you have to have variables and their indicators. As we talk about the political environment, what are indicators that there's political environment or factors that are affecting an institution that enables it either perform or not to perform? We can talk about government policies, regulatory framework, taxation systems. And when we talk about the dependent variables, as we talk about the performance, what are the indicators of performance? Efficiency, service quality, revenue growth. These are the things that you can be able to tell, or these are the indicators that as we talk about our variables, what are the indicators that we are going to use? You're going to try to, or you're going to establish the relationship that exists, the conceptual relationship. That what is it that has been said? That innovation, when you talk about innovation, for example, you find that the relationship is that innovation improves service efficiency and competitiveness. And that enhances performance. That if you want to be competitive, if you want to improve efficiency, then you go to innovation, and that results to performance. So there's a relationship that because of innovation, we are able to enhance our efficiency. We're able to be more competitive and gain competitive edge. And that enables us to perform. That as we talk about management restructuring, that we are going to streamline the decision-making process. And that is going to improve our operational outcomes, which is performance. So what is the relationship of modernization and performance? So you find that as we enhance technology and processes, it will boost performance. So modernization is about enhancing technology and the processes, making them modern, and that will boost performance. That the relationship, for example, between repositioning and performance is that you are going to reposition yourself to strengthen yourself in the market, in the mind of the people, in the place that you are working in. And that in itself results to increased in revenue, which is an indicator of performance. So you find that you have to get the relationship between each and every variable and how does it affect the dependent variable. You have to justify these linkages, that this relationship you're saying, they have to be justified, either because they are supported by existing theories, or they are supported by existing empirical evidence. That there's a theory that tells us this is what you're going to expect. And also, there's empirical findings that so and so did a study in 2020 and found this. So and so did in 2022, 2024. So there's that what you're expecting. And there's also a theoretical backing. And I've given examples here. I've quoted that innovation and performance is supported by empirical findings. That management restructuring and performance, we are talking about the contingency theory. That when we talk about modernization, it can be based in performance. We're basing it on resource-based theories. That as we talk about repositioning and performance, we are basing it on strategic fit theories. That as we talk about the political environment, we are basing them on institutional theories. And not only theories, there are also there is also empirical studies that also justify that whatever relationship I'm talking about, there are theories that talks about it, and there is also empirical evidence to it. Then you, of course, you'll have to draw your conceptual framework. And you can see what we have here. We have the independent variables, the intervening variables, and the dependent variables. That the relationship in a government institution between organization and performance, between innovation and performance, is mediated by the political environment. That when organizations undertake innovation, sometimes that gets the thinking of the political operatives, and they will adjust a few things and be able to, and that will impact performance. You find that one of the studies, you find that, for example, in a government institution, let's say like Kenya Meat Commission, when they started, from their findings, you find that as they undertook the modernization, because the government is a key holder, is the owner, they were able to change policies and give them guaranteed markets. So modernization impacted performance because we're able to prove to the government that we have the capacity to deliver. So what does the government do? It changes policies. It changes taxation policies. Let's not tax this. That as you restructure your management, what does that what does it, so yeah, the government the political environment here acts as an intervening variable. In the private sector, for example, the political environment acts as a moderating factor because the government does not, based on what you're doing in the political sector, for them to pass their policies. They pass their policies and you have to align. So you find that you're able to, you will have to draw a conceptual framework that you can easily be able to explain. You can easily be able to show what you're talking about, what the relationship is all about, what the study is all about. So in our concept framework that we have here, I'm trying to make an explanation out of it. That we have the independent variables that we have there: innovation, management restructuring, modernization, and strategic repositioning. And they show the independent variables or something that impacts the performance of commercial state corporations. And we are seeing that they have an indirect relationship because of the political environment. So the political environment serves as an intervening variable. Remember that commercial institutions are owned by government. They get development funding from government. So the government is the intervening variable. So you can do a lot, but what will happen if the political class or the political environment is not changing? It shows performance as a dependent variable. That if we are able to undertake our independent variable, we can be able to influence the political factors and we resort to performance. So it shows that logic flow, that this is what the study is trying to establish. And what is a bad conceptual framework? Or what is it that you're able to tell that this conceptual framework is not adding up? I've tried to distort the conceptual framework that we had before. We still have the same variables, but you're not able to tell which is a dependent variable, which is a dependent variable, which is an intervening variable. Why is it that some dependent variables are relating among themselves? What is the relationship between the intervening variables and the dependent variable? So you find that we don't have, if you look at this conceptual framework, you cannot even be able to tell what it is. Is it just a figure that exists, or is it a conceptual framework? So by the time you see this, you'll be able to tell this is a bad conceptual framework. It is not based on anything. There is no theoretical backing that you can find that says that, for example, modernization impacts innovation. There is no relationship that tells us, for example, that repositioning has a direct relationship with the intervening variable. So you can get this framework and you'll be able to tell that this one directory cannot even work. This is not a conceptual framework. And as you can see in the previous one, there's the direct relationship, which is the straight line, and there's the indirect relationship, which are the dotted lines. So you find that in our second one, there's the dotted line, there is the straight line. So you cannot be able to tell what is the direct relationship, what is the direct relationship. You cannot be able to tell us what is happening here. So this is a bad conceptual framework. And why is it that your conceptual framework will fail or will be seen as a bad conceptual framework? It will not have a direction of flow. So the arrows will not be able to make you understand where we are heading. So because you're able to tell the direct flow when, or the directional flow when a conceptual framework is working. But as you look at this one, which is bad, you cannot be able to tell there's missing directional flow. So the arrows that we have cannot be able to tell us how the variables are relating. It is overcomplicated and unclear. You know, sometimes as a scholar, you want to look as if you understand a lot. And you want to introduce so many variables. You want to have the independent variables, the dependent variables, an intervening variable, a moderating variable. You don't need all those variables. Sometimes you can just study a direct relationship that without anything else. That this is just the independent variables and the dependent variables. Just go for what the data that you have tells you, the theoretical foundation, the empirical finding. Just go for that. You find that it will be fail or it will be seen as a bad conceptual framework if it ignores the theoretical and the empirical justification. That what have others said, you just ignore and you develop something that looks as if you're trying to appear unique. But as you appear unique, you have to make sure that you do not ignore the theoretical and the empirical justification. That, for example, does not show the role of the political environment, either as a moderating and or a mediating variable. And as you can see here, you cannot be able to tell what is the role of the intervening variable. You just have an intervening variable that is relating with various variables, but does not clearly tell us how they are relating. So it lacks logic. If you look at this conceptual framework here, there is no logic behind it. There is nothing. Even if you are not a scholar, you cannot be able to tell what is the logic behind this. So it's not something that you can easily be able to see. You cannot even explain it. So what are the common mistakes that we make as scholars or as beginners, mostly before we develop and become better in our academics? The first mistake you'll make in a conceptual framework is trying to copy from other studies. So you don't make it unique to your own context. You just go, you copy it from somewhere else, and you paste it. You find another scholar who had studied a similar topic, you copy what they had, and you paste it. Your theories and the theories of that scholars are not the same. The empirical findings and the empirical findings are not the same. You ignore the basic variable definitions. It fails to operationalize the indicators. That you find you have ignored everything. You have just pasted. You don't try to have even indicators in that theoretical in that conceptual framework. So you have your indicators. You have the indicators of or the variables there, but they don't have indicators. So you're talking about innovation without the indicators of innovation. We are talking about performance without the indicators of performance. You have just ignored them and pasted them there. Sometimes you overcomplicate the relationship where you add so many variables. You find that you overcomplicate simple things. Sometimes academics is not that complicated. So stop trying to make it more complicated. Stop trying to add more details where you don't need a lot of details. You also find that it is not aligned with your research objectives and hypotheses. That I've studied your document, I've seen your objectives, I've seen your hypotheses, I've seen your questions, I've even seen your literature review, but the conceptual framework seems to have appeared from maybe heaven. It is not aligned to anything. It is something that is just there. It is not grounded on any theoretical backing. That whatever the theories were talking, as I was looking at your your theories in the theoretical review, and then I come and see the conceptual framework, I see they are not aligned again. It's not grounded there. It's not backed by any theory or literature. That the empirical findings and everything. Visually, it is not clear. You find that your diagram is messy. It does not tell us anything. Yeah, it might even have all the right things, but it's very messy. It is not clear at all. So I always remember that your framework should tell a clear and logical story of how your study works. Don't just have the boxes and the arrows. Let us tell us the story behind what it is that you're doing. Some of the things that you learn from the bad example that we have given is that you need simplicity and you need clarity. You need to be simple. Stop complicating everything. Let it be something that someone can easily follow. Don't say that because I'm a PhD candidate, I need something that is so difficult for people to understand. Don't try to say that I need a theoretical framework that needs a master's or a PhD degree for someone to understand to prove that I'm a PhD student. It's something that should be simple and clear. It should have theoretical grounding. Your relationship should be supported by the theories and also past research. You cannot just develop a conceptual framework without theoretical grounding. You also find that it should be logical and consistent. So it should it's still something that you can easily find the logic in what that person or what that researcher is saying. It's something that you can make sense out of, not something that you require 10 people to come and discuss trying to make the sense out of it. It should be visually something that everyone can do. The readability.
Be very
clear arrows, labels, the design, everything. Relevance. It should directly address the research questions that you have. So you find that it doesn't just look neat. That your conceptual framework doesn't just have to look neat. It should reflect sound thinking and solid grasp of the theories that exist. So how do you refine your conceptual framework as we head
Excuse
towards
me,
the end?
Frederick.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Frederick.
Yeah.
We have how many minutes? 18 minutes left.
Yeah.
We have questions. We need some time for questions so that there can be some discussion. So how do you want to proceed?
I have around 4 slides, so I'll have around 10 minutes to complete them. Maybe you can add a few minutes.
Okay, maybe you can do 5 minutes because it's late in the night. Then at least we have 15 minutes for questions. Yeah.
Okay. So how do you make your framework better? So you have to clarify your variables. You have to simplify the relationship. It has to be anchored with the theories. visually. It has to be something that is clear, and it has to be aligned with the objectives. So, as you try, if you have a messy framework, try to make it the variables should be very. You should clarify what are they dependent, what are they dependent. Simplify that relationship. Don't have so many. Don't have a lot of things happening. Anchor it with the theories and such things. What are the characteristics of a strong conceptual framework? You find that for you to know that your conceptual framework is very strong, you need to have clear variables. The variables should be well defined from as you develop your research. You need to have a logical flow of that relationship. How are they relating? It has to be grounded with the theories and treatises, as I've said. It should be something that we can test and should be something that is testable and focused. It should be aligned with the objectives that you have in your study, and visually should be coherent. So you find that for you to have a strong conceptual framework, you need to do these things. So as you develop your conceptual framework, there's a few things that you need to ask yourself. Are my variables well defined, and are they measurable? Is the relationship logical and clearly illustrated? Is the framework grounded on theory and empirical evidence? Those are questions. They are questions that you ask yourself. Is a checklist. Does it align with my research objectives and questions? Like this framework I have, is it aligned to my objectives and questions? Can it generate testable hypotheses and propositions? Is a visual layout clear, balanced, and easy to interpret? So these are things that you just need to ask yourself as you develop that. There are comments that after you submit your framework or your research, there are various questions that you might get from the reviewer. They might say that your conceptual framework is not clearly linked to your objectives. When they see it and the objectives, it's not linked. That the variables are not well defined and measurable. That the indicators you have cannot be used to measure the relationship we have. That the relationship among variables may not be logical. That the framework lacks theoretical and empirical grounding. That we have too many variables. That you have mentioned the moderating and mediating effects, but you are not showing them in the diagram. That maybe as you are talking in your background of the study, you talked about mediating and moderating variables, but they are not seen in the figure. That the framework might be copied and not tailored to your study. Those are some of the comments that we'll get. So some of the things that we need to take away in this discussion today is that the conceptual framework is your roadmap, which will connect your theories, your variables, and the objectives. That you need to be clear and logical more than being complex. Complexity is not an achievement in research. That you need to ground your relationship on theories and prior empirical evidence. That the relationship among variables is based on theories and existing variables. That a visual diagram is very important. So you need to use arrows and labels and a balanced structure. It should look like a real diagram that has been developed by a researcher. That you need to include all the key variables. That is the independent, the dependent, the mediating or moderating. That the key variables that you need are the ones that you need to put. That you keep on continuously refining your conceptual framework as you get comments and feedback from your supervisor in the panels as you present. That a strong conceptual framework ensures your research is analytical, testable, and credible. That is my presentation. Asanteni sana. Over to you, Madam Facilitator.
Thank you very, very much, Frederick, for that very detailed presentation. And you have brought out very key points that really make it possible for someone as they are thinking of their conceptual framework to even understand why, to even understand what is it, the distinctions. And I think that's so critical. So thank you very much. We can show our appreciation with emojis online. So we have a few questions that have come up that we can answer. And members in the group, feel free to also answer on chat if you have answers. As we said, we are all learning together. So one question from Anne says, thank you for the great presentation. Could you please explain again how you have the direct relationship in the correct conceptual framework example? Is the straight line, is it the straight line that you mentioned, or how does it go to the dependent variable? So how do you show the direct relationship? Then from the explanations, I could not make out the difference between theoretical and conceptual framework, since both of them are nested in already existing established grounding theory. So that distinction, now that they are all based on theory, there's someone there who would like some description. And Dom, does one need to explain fully the conceptual framework, just like in the theoretical framework? That is Paul. Thanks for sharing. Can I get clarification whether theories ever get outdated or updated? That is Susan. I'm struggling to draw the line between conceptual and theoretical framework as they are both based on existing theory. How can the difference be simplified in the study? So that is coming again. Thank you. Can you use the case study to illustrate how to link conceptual framework with objectives? Okay, so there is someone who needs a practical example of the linkages. I'm not sure we can do that today, but we can plan a session of the how, maybe more practical examples. Thank you. Will the resources be shared? Yes. Thank you for this priceless training. Of course, we will share the slides with Frederick's permission, and we will also share the recording. So what is the difference between intervening, moderating, mediating variable? So there's someone who hasn't gotten the clear distinction. So because these questions are many, Frederick, answer what you can because of time. And those who are on the chat and you can answer, who are on the platform, please also put your answers there, share a link that can help someone read further so that we can all participate in answering this question. So over to you, Frederick, for what you can answer.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I think I have had quite a number of questions. One that kept on being repeated is the difference between a conceptual framework and a theoretical framework. And as I was explaining in this slide, that a conceptual framework is basically drawn from existing theories. A theoretical framework is basically drawn from existing theories. you rarely find yourself trying to look at more empirical data on the findings of such things. So basically, you are basing your argument on theories. That the theories tell us this, and that is what you're presenting in the in the theoretical framework. That the theories tell us that there is a direct relationship between performance and, let's say, modernization. That is what the theories tell us, and it can give us a direct relationship. But when it comes to the conceptual framework, we are going further because we are also going to look at the empirical findings. But what has other scholars who have studied, let's say, innovation and performance found? That was not there when we are dealing with the theoretical framework. What are the other scholars telling us about modernization and performance? So you find that the practical findings, the research findings from other scholars come up in the as you develop the theoretical, the conceptual framework. You also find that you are trying to operationalize. When you find that the theories were just trying to give a basic, you find that the theoretical framework does not have indicators, but a conceptual framework will have indicators because you're trying to operationalize this thing. That as we talk about innovation, what are the indicators? That those things are not there in a theoretical framework. That as we talk about performance, what are the indicators? So these are the things that we bring on the conceptual framework that were not there in the theoretical framework. The logic that from the studies that you have done over the years, from your experience, those things are not there in the theoretical framework. So the theoretical just give us what does the theory say, but a conceptual framework builds on that. And you find that in chapter 2 of your research topic, there's a whole section where you discuss those variables, performance. I think it's 2.3, 2.1, 2.31, 2.32, that way. You discuss all your variables, highlighting how the indicators you have talked about. So as you are done with that, that is the time now you develop the framework. That these are the indicators I've seen. The question that has really come up is about the relationship that exists. You find that when we have a direct relationship, we usually use a straight line. When there is an intervening variable, we use the dotted line because it is affecting that relationship. There is a difference between a moderating variable because a moderating variable, there is nothing much you can do. So it moderates, but it cannot, for example, the government cannot listen to you as an owner of a private business. You are the largest shareholder of a private business. The government will not come and ask you for your opinions. They will just develop their own things. But for the government institutions, they will go and negotiate with the government that we are undertaking this project. And it will have impact on our performance. But on your side, we need you to change a few things on policy. So the government will come, for example, if, for example, we want our public universities to perform, the government can come up with a policy on how to increase the numbers, how to increase the funding. So those things are not there in the private sector. There's nothing much that we can do. There are various variables that we have. We will have an independent variable. I think that one is something that we all understand at this level, that these are the dependent variables. Then we have the dependent variable that is easy to understand. And every study you find that is very easy to put there. That we have an independent variable and a dependent variable. And it is good to put it this way, that if we are not so sure about how to develop your research, just deal with the two. Don't complicate by trying to add either a moderating variable or an intervening variable. Of course, the intervening variable again is the mediating variable. So try as much as possible to deal with what you understand. Don't try to add a lot of information, because it might result to being a bad or you might be seen as if you're just putting things there to be seen. The other question that came, I don't seem to remember the others, but those I think were the key two that I remember. Someone was talking about a case study that might require more time before we look into it.
I don't have a blocker. Wait. Yes, Frederick.
Oh,
You're
sorry.
speaking? Yeah.
Oh, I had lost. Sorry about that. I found myself as I was trying to explain. But what I was trying to say is that for you to understand a conceptual framework, you 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 need first to understand your objectives. You need to really go through your hypothesis, because you are trying to show the relationship. It's just the practical representation of what your research is all about. I think those are the two that I can really be able to answer at this time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Frederick. And as we always say with these sessions, Frederick has laid the foundation, but as people who are students, I included, we now go and dig deeper. The onus is on us to now that we have that foundational understanding, we can now go and do some self-learning, and we will share the slides. How will you get them? We share them on the Africana Journal Club and on the Rising Scholars page. So if you're on those two pages, you will get them. If you're not on those two pages, I will share how to join the club. Then you can join, and then you can have all those resources. So I would encourage us, especially for the questions we haven't answered, we will see if Frederick will have some more time to come and do a practical session with us. If not, we will also encourage more self-learning. I've also shared some materials from Grad Coach. Grad Coach is on YouTube. I don't know how many of you use YouTube to learn research. It's such a good resource as well. You can go there. I've shared some that helps you distinguish some of the questions that have been asked, the variables and all that. So use also resources like YouTube, because some universities, some people have curated material for research. Use research textbooks because they really help you understand the why, the what, and the how, rather than journal articles. And I think some of the content that Frederick has spoken about, he mentioned without explicitly saying it, it's good to check the textbooks as well. Go to the textbook and try and understand what is a moderating variable. How is it? If you can't understand the textbook, go to our YouTube page, go and Google what is a moderating variable. So let your learning not just be from the webinar, but this is just a teaser to help you go deeper into the how. Okay, so I think because of time, normally we don't hold sessions at night, so we really thank Frederick for finding time to do this, and we also thank you so much for joining the session today. Let me share the page for joining the Africana Journal Club if you're not in it. I'll just give 2 minutes to anyone who wants to say something before we close. And then we give Frederick his flowers, we give him his emoji. Thank you so much. Frederick is also volunteering as a mentor in the club. And we really, really are so grateful, Frederick, for what you're doing. So does anyone in the room want to say something?
Thank you,
So a
Frederick.
lot of,
We really enjoyed it.
yes, and Tom? I
Yeah,
can see a lot of,
just to thank
yeah?
Frederick for a very great lecture. It was really insightful. Thank you very much for all the work. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you, Frederick. Remember, Frederick is volunteering. No one is paying for his time. So really, we really appreciate. Yes, please go ahead.
It was a good presentation and it has really helped. So how can I join the club, please?
I'm trying to share the link. Let me get it.
Okay.
Then you can join. It's a space where we are promoting research. The videos from these sessions, we post them on our page, Ada Africa. We have many, many videos over the years. We've been around for a number of years, so you can check those videos. Let me just share on the chat. There is the link on how to join. Then you'll be added. You don't join directly. You fill in some details, then you'll be added. So there is the link. It's a Google form. So I'll just hang around for 2 minutes so that people can copy what they're copying. Frederick, do you have anything to say?
Not really, just to thank everyone for the positive comments. And academics is a learning process, so I expect also to learn more as we continue, and also to join as a listener some of these fine days and also learn a lot.
Absolutely. So every month, thank you so much, Frederick, even to see that you're even a PhD candidate and you're offering of yourself. And one of the ways to learn research actually is to teach research. So even in Frederick preparing this presentation, yeah, I'm sure he has learned a lot, and thank you. Really, thank you so much. So we usually hold an event called the open presentation. This is where we invite members to come and present their research for other members to listen. So we do like 4 people come and present every month. I think this has been a good opportunity for people to actually just share their research beyond their supervisor and get comments. And as we always say in research, let not your supervisor be the only person who can give you feedback. Expose your research to as many people as possible so that you can get a breadth of feedback. So for those who are interested, we usually make out a call in the group, come present your research, and we will listen. We will give feedback. If your research is very specialized, like sometimes we have people who are in mathematics, who are in very specialized fields, we always ask the member to look for someone in their discipline to come and listen, like a lecturer or another student or a peer, and we've seen it very valuable. So we have those different opportunities to help us grow in research. So I think now we will say good night, goodbye, good morning from wherever you are, those who are in their mornings.